So before joining the military, I had the unique honor and pleasure of serving as a United States wildland firefighter in both Missoula and Darby, Montana for 2 seasons. And one of the great things that I learned as a wildland firefighter is that every season, when this fire, this existential threat, would impact these communities, people did a very remarkable thing. They began to organize and prepare themselves around fire. And what was remarkable about it is that no matter how far they were, 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, even 100 miles, everybody had taken stock of what assets that they need to utilize to prepare for what we would all consider an existential threat. So whether you had an extra pickup that would allow you to move your items in case of disaster, or whether you had extra saws so you can help prepare your neighbor's property to be more resilient in fire, or whether you had an extra RV, and if your family was evacuated, you knew that this neighbor would put you up on their land or you can go camp out with them. I really appreciated and learned this about this community and this idea of existential threat. You know, things that we fear that will have a catastrophic impact on the things we hold most dear, our families, friends, loved ones. This idea of existential threat followed me while I was in the military. I mean, the military is designed to engage our nation's existential threats, and we build teams around these existential threats. We take perfectly good strangers and make them close, if not closer than family. While I described some of the positive outcomes of existential threat, there are also negative outcomes as well. It didn't take long after the Sandy Hook tragedy for people to start to tribalize around the anti-gun or pro-gun movement. It didn't take long for people to also engage in a very reactive conversation around mental health either, or bullying. Or worse, being a child from the city of Chicago, where we can have a similar situation to Sandy Hook in one weekend, it's quite surprising that our nation does not stop and have a very even reactive conversation around the gun violence that plagues many of our urban communities. And so when I left the military, I decided to co-found an organization called Leave No Veteran Behind. And we provide transitional jobs to veterans. And one of the first transitional jobs we decided to take on was addressing youth violence. And we did this by leveraging some of our skills that we learned in Iraq and Afghanistan. And we would go out into a very specific neighborhood and provide presence patrols without the guns. Our goal was to de-escalate situations around schools before and after. And on one particular day, one cold Chicago day, there was an old lady who was standing on one of these corners waiting for a bus. And I noticed that she had waited for 3 buses to actually pass by. And I didn't understand why she would wait on this corner, see the kids pile into these buses. So I walked up to her and I said, you know, ma'am, do you want to get on the bus? And she said, yes, I do, but these kids, they cause nothing but trouble. And I said, well, let's try to get you on this next bus. And so I walked up to these children, and they were doing what normal children do, right? Talking to their boyfriends and girlfriends, talking about school gossip, having conversation. And I walked up to these children and I said, hey, would you mind if this lady gets on the bus first? And they said, of course, you know, that's not a problem. So the next bus pulls up, she gets on the bus, and the kids pile on afterwards. And at that moment, I realized what happened to my community, right? So these kids had not taken stock of the asset, this elder who was waiting for the bus. And this elder had saw these children, that could be her children, as a threat. And that's a tough thing. That's a tough place to be when you serve in the military and you come back after fighting a war, and in your own communities, we see each other as an existential threat. So I told everybody who was on our team, I said, you know what, when these children walk by us, make sure you treat them like you would treat any officer who walks by you. Make sure you say, hello, sir, hello, ma'am. And when they first started doing this, many of these kids would just look at us in a very quizzical way because many of them have never been called sir or ma'am a day in their life. But over that course of a year, something really strange began to happen. We would say, hello, sir, hello, ma'am, and these children would respond back, hello, sir, hello, ma'am, to us as well. But more importantly, not only would they say this to us, some of these children, they would see an elder and they would start saying, hello, sir, hello, ma'am, to them. So I talked a lot about existential threat, and I talked a lot about fear. And one of the existential threats for me, one of the fears that I had leaving the military, was I love the fact that I can meet somebody from Kentucky. I love the fact that I can meet somebody from Montana or whatever and develop really strong bonds with perfectly good strangers. And I thought that when I left the military, I would never have an opportunity to do that again. After 5 years of doing this work, hundreds of people going through our transitional jobs program and helping decrease violence on the South Side, I've been very lucky to be able to develop great relationships with veterans who were perfectly good strangers, community members that I never thought I knew, and children who are just looking for opportunities for respect. But more importantly, I realize that as veterans who are trained to understand what existential threat is and what it's not, we're also trained to leverage this for better for our community. We're able to leverage this in ways where we can see each other as part of solutions and not part of the problem. Thank you so much.